The congregation had settled into their new church at Vine and Broadway and continued to grow through the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. During this time, the women formed groups to share their faith, help the less fortunate, and raise funds for the church's needs. Now let's fast forward to the early 1920s. This morning, a group of church members has gathered to prepare a history presentation to be given to the congregation. Though the time is the 1920s, you'll notice from their attire and manners that these women still remember the gay 90s of their youth. We see the committee chairwoman, Lucille Burke, followed by May Roundabush. Both of their husbands are landowners with farms located east of town along the pike. They are followed by Dee Campbell and Clara Brine. Their husbands are successful merchants, and they both live in town.
Come along, girls. We might as well meet in the sanctuary. I tell you, there's nowhere else. If this church gets any busier, I don't know what we'll do.
Why are we meeting in the sanctuary? What's wrong with the primary rooms or the Sunday school room?
Well, Miss Lizzie Bowles is in the Sunday school room. She's with the Home Missionary Society. You know, they were the first women's organization in the church. They were organized in 1882. And that very first year, they raised $100 by being frugal and doing a lot of quilting and work. They put a whole kitchen in the parsonage next door. And after that, they had musical entertainments, and they had literary programs, and they raised funds and donations for the needy and for our church.
Well, and then Miss Francis is holding a meeting downstairs with the deacons down in the primary room.
Did you try the kitchen, Lucille?
No, the ladies' aid is in the kitchen.
What are they planning now? Another work project?
I don't know, but they certainly were having some good Christian fellowship. They were giggling and laughing while they were working on their quilts.
They always seem to have fun while they're raising funds, don't they?
Yes, and they always do it with such good taste.
Well, speaking of the Ladies' Aid Society, those women were workers. They would come in almost every Wednesday. They would make sunbonnets and aprons and dust caps and dish rags. And then they'd have other work days when they'd come in and they would clean the manse and they would clean the kitchen downstairs. And then they would raise also funds for the needs of the church. The most recent was the sanctuary carpet to commemorate the centennial of 1911.
Oh my, isn't it just wonderful what the women of this church did over the first 100 years? Just unbelievable what they did. Did you know of the first 17 original members, 10 of them were women? But I believe that's enough information about the women's groups. Now, you all have your history book with you this morning, and I think we all had assignments of things we're supposed to cover. Now, and I'm sure you've done your work. So now, who would like to go first?
Well, Lucille, I'm not for sure I can share the information that I've discovered.
What is it, Clara?
Well, it's about the trial that took place when the Reverend Galladay was here.
Oh, what page are you on? She's on page 7.
Oh my! It says here that Dr. Marvin was put on trial because he insisted on talking politics, and on a Sunday, no less.
And one young girl was not allowed to come to Sunday school or church for 3 weeks because she participated in a play at some theater. It seems to me that it would have been more of a punishment to keep her in church. They don't think it's a punishment to stay out of church.
Speaking of punishment, 2 men had their memberships revoked because they used foul language. It seems one of them hit his thumb with a hammer while doing repairs on the church.
Well, if I had been Reverend Galladay, I would have taken my hammer and hit a few more thumbs.
Oh, now, Dee, no, not you. You of all people, you wouldn't have done that.
Oh, yes, I would. Do you know that my great-grandfather, all he ever said was jump in Jehovah? not allowed in church or to come to the Lord's table for a year.
My 4 young people were punished for attending a dance. They were not allowed in church for 3 months.
Well, I can understand that. Dancing, all those silly foxtrots and charlestons. We're Presbyterians. It's a disgrace.
Part of that old, Clara. Don't you remember the barn dances and the picnics and the cakewalks? If I'm not mistaken, you were the one who tended to win the most prizes for the cakewalks.
The pot mustn't call the kettle black, Clara.
Well, I think I like the cakewalks.
Now, really, girls, we must get back to business. We're kind of off the subject here.
I agree. Lucille, I agree with you. But we mustn't forget to mention your mother-in-law, Martha Krudenberg. I still can't imagine that she went in 1888 on a train by herself to New York City to oversee the construction of the stained glass windows. And they are just as beautiful today.
Oh yes, we must keep those windows. Can you just picture the Riffners and the Prudens and the Marvins when this church was so young? Their names must remain to remind us of the depth of our faith and continuity. All thanks to Mrs. Burke and her efforts.
Well, you know, Mother Burke never made a big issue of that. She thought if her little sister, Susie Pruden, when she was only 12, could ride her horse during the Civil War to warn Harrison of Morgan's raiders, well, the least she could do would be get on a train and ride to New York. She also talked about Reverend Carson. He was the pastor at that time, and he just was such an inspiration that everyone in the congregation wanted to do all they could.
Well, you know, Lucille, they got the wooden pews at the same time to go along with the beautiful windows. And I'm sure that they thought the sanctuary was divine when they were finished.
This is just too much, but you know, we're running out of time. I promised Mrs. Cheatham we wouldn't be late for advance club. So we'll have to put the Sunday school report off till next week.
I have my report on the choir.
Well, is it long? Because we need to cover this morning the anniversary.
I'll agree.
Okay.
Well, the choir was organized as early as 1855, and an organ was acquired around the same time. Then in the 1890s, the Gay 90s Choir Club was organized. This was a very popular group. They were invited to appear in a variety of places in neighboring communities. It seems this church has always been blessed with such talented musicians and vocalists. I'd like to have a crystal ball and be able to look about 100 years from now and see what kind of music we'd be doing then.
Well, I'm sure I don't know, but if your 2 children have anything to do about it, we'll have a church full of young people swinging and jazzing, swinging and jazzing.
This meeting is adjourned.
Now, Lucille, let's not get upset. No. We are all sitting here talking about the wonderful things these church women have done over the last 100 years. We're all here for the same purpose. We're all striving for the same goal. So let's you and I swing on out of here and celebrate the blessings we have with our church.
You know, May, you're right. But we have to keep up with our children, so let's swing.
All right.
Well, swing along.
Come along. Come along. You know what? Since you're just in a huffy mood today, we are going to stop at the west side on the way home, and I am going to treat you to a phosphate. So come along.
What is a phosphate, Dee Dee?
You should know.
Well, it seems our ladies have adjourned for the day before they can complete their task. So I'm sure they would want me to tell you about the wonderful centennial celebration that took place in 1911, honoring the 100th anniversary of the founding of our congregation. In the spring of that year, the auditorium was improved and redecorated, including beautiful new carpeting paid for by the Ladies' Aid Society. Then on May 19th, 1911, an all-day meeting was held, starting with a sunrise prayer meeting at 6:30 a.m. Members, former pastors, and friends came from far and near to help celebrate the 100th birthday of the Presbyterian congregation in the Whitewater Valley.